Why do 70% of people think slavery in Ireland was only about the famine? When we think of Irish suffering, the Great Famine of the 1840s often dominates our minds. Images of starving families, mass emigration, and tragic loss are etched into the collective memory of Ireland and its diaspora. But is this the full story? What if the roots of Irish suffering and its connection to slavery go much deeper than the potato blight and the famine years? The truth goes way deeper. Let's uncover the real story. For centuries, the narrative of Irish history has been shaped by trauma, resilience, and survival. But hidden beneath the surface is a chapter that is rarely discussed in classrooms or commemorated in public monuments: Ireland's entanglement in the British slave trade. Long before the Age of Empire, Ireland was caught in the web of the British slave trade. The story begins in the early 17th century, when the British Empire was expanding its reach across the Atlantic. Ireland, then under English rule, became a crucial source of labour for Britain's growing colonial ambitions. Irish ports like Cork, Kinsale and Waterford bustled with ships not just carrying goods, but also people, many of whom were destined for a life of forced servitude far from home. Starting in the 1600s, tens of thousands of Irish men, women, and even children were seized from their homes and shipped to the Caribbean as forced labour. These were not isolated incidents. Raids, kidnappings, and forced deportations became a grim reality for many Irish communities. The British authorities, seeking to populate their new colonies and maximise profits, saw the Irish as expendable labour. Many were victims of Cromwell's brutal campaigns, punished for rebellion or simply for being poor. Oliver Cromwell's conquest of Ireland in the 1650s was particularly devastating. Entire towns were razed, and thousands of Irish people were rounded up and sent to the Caribbean as punishment for resisting English rule. For many, the only crime was being Catholic, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were sold as indentured servants, but the reality was often brutal slavery. The term indentured servant might sound less harsh than slave, but for many Irish captives, the difference was little more than a legal technicality. Contracts were often forged or misunderstood, and the conditions on Caribbean plantations were appalling. Many never lived to see freedom. The Caribbean sugar plantations were notorious for their brutality. Irish captives toiled on sugar plantations in Barbados, Jamaica, and beyond, side by side with enslaved Africans. The work was grueling, the climate unforgiving, and the overseers merciless. Disease, malnutrition, and violence claimed countless lives. The Irish, like their African counterparts, were seen as property, bought, sold, and traded for profit. Some records say entire villages vanished overnight. The impact on Ireland was profound. In some regions, the loss of so many people, especially the young and able-bodied, left communities devastated. Fields went untended, homes fell into ruin, and the social fabric of rural Ireland was torn apart. The trauma of these disappearances echoed through generations. Families were split, names erased, and identities lost across the ocean. For those taken, the journey was harrowing. Families were separated at ports, children torn from parents, and names changed or lost entirely. Many Irish surnames disappeared from the records, their bearers assimilated or perished in distant lands. The sense of loss was not just personal but cultural, a severing of roots that would never fully heal. The British profited while Irish lives were changed forever. The wealth generated by Irish and African labour in the Caribbean fueled the rise of British cities and industries. Sugar, rum and tobacco poured into British ports, enriching merchants and funding further expansion. Meanwhile, the Irish who survived in the colonies faced a lifetime of hardship, their stories largely forgotten by the world that profited from their suffering. But the Irish didn't just suffer, they resisted. Despite the overwhelming odds, stories of Irish defiance and resilience emerged. Some led uprisings on plantations, others escaped into the hills and jungles, forming communities of runaways known as Maroons. Irish and African captives sometimes joined forces, united by their shared oppression and hope for freedom. Stories survive of uprisings, escapes, and solidarity among the enslaved. These acts of resistance were dangerous, often met with brutal reprisals, yet they inspired hope and forged bonds between people of different backgrounds. The legacy of this solidarity can still be seen today in the cultural connections between Ireland and the Caribbean. Today, descendants still search for traces of their ancestors in the Caribbean, piecing together a story often left out of history books. Through DNA testing, archival research, and oral histories, families are reconnecting with lost relatives and rediscovering their roots. These efforts are helping to restore a sense of identity and belonging that was stolen centuries ago. Ireland's connection to the slave trade is a reminder. History is complicated, and every story deserves to be told. The legacy of the Irish in the Caribbean is visible in language, music, and even place names. Yet for too long, this chapter has been overshadowed by other narratives. By acknowledging the full scope of Ireland's past, we honour the resilience of those who endured and the importance of remembering all who were lost. If you found this story eye-opening, remember that history is full of hidden truths waiting to be discovered. By learning and sharing these stories, we help ensure that the voices of the past are not forgotten. For more interesting contents like this, please subscribe, like and comment, and follow our YouTube channel for full stories.